She ironed his shirt that morning. The same hands that had scrubbed his floors, organized his household, memorized the names of every business partner he had ever needed to impress, managed every dinner, every function, every carefully constructed version of the Jeon family that the world was allowed to see. Those same hands pressed every crease out of the shirt he wore to take another woman to the biggest gala in Seoul. Zoya did not watch the car leave. She stood in the kitchen of the house she had poured herself into for 4 years, and she listened to the silence after the gate closed. And for a long time she just stood there. She had known about Ryun Jeon for 14 months. She had never said a word. Not because she was broken, not because she had no options, but because Zoya had spent 4 years learning that in the world the Jeon family occupied, a wife who caused scenes lost everything, and a wife who held herself together lost quietly and on her own terms. So she held herself together. She cooked. She cleaned. She smiled at the right people. She made Ryun Jeon look like a man worth trusting. She swallowed things that would have destroyed a less disciplined woman, and she kept going. Then Jisoo walked into her kitchen that afternoon and stood on Zoya's floors and looked at her with the particular smile of a woman who has decided the war is already over. "He is taking me tonight," she said. "To the gala. In front of everyone. I want you to understand what that means." She had tilted her head. "You run this house like a servant. You have always been the help. And tonight the whole of Seoul is going to see exactly who he chose." Jisoo left. Zoya stood in her kitchen for 4 minutes and 40 seconds. She counted them. Then she went upstairs. She was not thinking clearly. She would admit that to herself later. She was not operating from a plan. She was operating from something older and deeper than a plan, the part of a woman that reaches its absolute limit and simply refuses to sit down anymore. She pulled out the burgundy gown she had bought 6 months ago for an occasion that never came. She did her hair. She did her face. She called a car she paid for herself from the account Ryan did not know she had been quietly building for 7 months. She told herself she was not going there to win him back. She told herself she was not going there hoping he would choose her. She was going because Jisoo had stood in her house and called her the help, and she needed him to see her. Just once. She needed to stand in that room and be seen before she signed the papers she had already decided she was going to sign in the morning. She was not sure he was going to choose her. That was the truth she was carrying in her chest when the car stopped outside the Grand Hyatt Seoul. These were his people, yes. These were the investors and the partners and the old families who had known the Jeon name for decades. Some of them knew her. Some of them respected her. But Ryun Jeon had a way of managing rooms. A way of making things work in his favor even when they should not. She did not know what he was going to do. She genuinely did not know. She stepped out of the car. She walked to the entrance. She stood at the top of those stairs in a burgundy gown with her natural hair pinned exactly so, and her hands perfectly still at her sides, even though nothing inside her was still, and she looked into that ballroom at 300 people, and the sound of the room reached her like something physical. Then it began to change. Conversations near the door dropped first. Then the ones behind those. Heads turning. Champagne flutes held midair. The particular silence that moves through a room when something has entered it that nobody prepared for. She found his table without looking for it. She already knew where it was. Ryun Jeon was already looking at her. And beside him, in a silver dress, with a smile that had not yet understood what was happening, sat Ryun Jeon. Zoya did not move. She stood in that entrance and held her husband's gaze across the full length of the Grand Hyatt ballroom, and she let him see her. All of her. The woman who had ironed his shirt that morning. The woman who had been called to help in her own home that afternoon. The woman who had come here tonight not because she was sure of him, but because she refused to disappear quietly while another woman took credit for everything she had built. The room was watching. The partners were watching. Chairman Wu, who had signed 3 major agreements with the Jeon Group specifically because he trusted the family, was watching from table 7. The Shin family, who had sent Zoya flowers on her birthday every year for 3 years, was watching from the east wall. And Ryun Jeon was sitting at the head table between the woman he had been hiding and the weight of everything he stood to lose, and the entire room was holding its breath waiting to see what he was going to do. Zoya's hands were still at her sides. Her face was giving nothing away. But inside that burgundy dress, inside the stillness she had spent 4 years perfecting, her heart was doing something she had not given it permission to do. It was hoping. She hated that it was hoping. She had told herself she was past hoping. She had told herself this was just about being seen, just about standing up once before she walked away. But standing there in that entrance with his eyes on her, and the whole room watching and everything about to break one way or the other, she understood that you cannot spend 4 years loving someone, even badly, even quietly, even while they are breaking you, and then stand in a room like this one and feel nothing. She felt everything, and she had no idea what he was going to do. Ryun Jeon's chair moved. The room inhaled. Hi besties, welcome to Cross-World Romance Stories. If you are new here, you are in exactly the right place at exactly the right time, and I need you to subscribe right now because this story is going to reach inside your chest and rearrange something. Like this video, share it with every woman you know who has ever given a man everything and been treated like she gave him nothing, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you are watching from. Now, let us go all the way back to the beginning, because you need to understand who Zoya was before that ballroom before you can understand what it cost her to stand in it. Zoya Adami met Ryun Jeon at an embassy function in Lagos 4.5 years ago, and she was not looking for anyone. That is the part that matters. She was not at that event scanning the room for a husband. She was there because her uncle was a senior diplomat and had insisted she attend, and she had worn a green dress and spent the first 40 minutes standing near the food table because the food was genuinely extraordinary and she had priorities. Ryun Jeon found her at the food table. He was 31 years old. Heir to the Jeon Group, one of South Korea's most established conglomerates with interests in technology, real estate, and private infrastructure. He was in Lagos for a partnership meeting with the Nigerian government and had been dragged to the embassy function by his chief of staff, who had told him it was necessary for optics. He did not want to be there. He was also standing near the food table because he too had priorities. They reached for the same thing at the same time. It was a small pastry. It was not important. What was important was that he looked at her and said, in very careful English, "You have excellent taste." And she said without looking at him, "I know. I also have fast hands, so I would reconsider if I were you." And he laughed. A genuine one. The kind that surprised him. They talked for 2 hours. She did not know who he was for the first 45 minutes, and he found that so refreshing that he chose not to correct it for longer than he should have. She was warm and sharp and funny in the specific way of someone who has never needed a room's approval to feel confident in it. When she finally found out who he was, she looked at him for a moment and said, "Well, that explains the suit," and went back to her food, and he had been fascinated by her from that point forward without interruption. He pursued her for 6 months. Not lazily, deliberately. He called. He visited Lagos twice. He sent things she mentioned wanting in passing, not grand expensive things, specific things, a book she had said she could not find, a spice she had mentioned missing when she was in London for her master's degree. He listened in the way that men listen when they are genuinely interested and not simply waiting for their turn to speak. Zoya was careful. She had seen how the world treated black women who married into powerful Asian families, and she was not naive about what she was walking into. She asked him direct questions. She told him direct things about herself. She did not perform smallness to make him comfortable, and she watched very carefully to see whether her fullness made him pull back. It did not. He married her in a ceremony that was quieter than his family would have preferred, in Lagos, with her people around her, because she had told him she was not getting married in a country where she did not yet know the language, and he had agreed immediately, which told her something important about him. Or she thought it told her something important about him. She would spend the next 4 years revising that assessment slowly and painfully, and in the private silence of a house that was hers in labor and his in name. The first year was good. She would not rewrite that. It was genuinely good. He was attentive and present, and she was building something in Seoul, learning the language, learning the city, learning the specific social architecture of the world she had married into. She hosted her first Jeon family dinner 8 months in. She was nervous in a way she did not show anyone, and the dinner was flawless in a way that people talked about for months afterward. Chairman Wu told Ryun afterward that his wife had a quality that money could not manufacture. Ryun had been proud. He had told her what the chairman said, and she had smiled and gone to bed and felt for the first time like she might actually belong here. She was so busy becoming the perfect Jeon wife that she almost did not notice when he started becoming less of a Jeon husband. And here is the part that nobody tells you about this kind of marriage. The part that makes it so difficult to leave early and so easy to stay too long. The love was real. That is the complicated truth. Ryun Jeon had genuinely loved her in the beginning. Not performed it. Not calculated it. She could see the difference, and she had always been able to see the difference, and what she had seen in those first 2 years was real. He had chosen her specifically. He had crossed an ocean twice to prove he meant it. He had married her in Lagos in front of her people because she had asked, and he had said yes, without a single negotiation. That was real. That was a man who at that time understood what he was choosing. The problem was not that he had never loved her. The problem was that he had loved her and then gradually treated her like the loving was a completed task rather than a continuing one. Like marriage was a destination you arrived at and then stopped navigating. Like the woman he had pursued across an ocean could be relied upon to simply remain exactly as she was without any of the attention and intention that had made her fall in love with him in the first place. He stopped asking how she was. Not dramatically. Gradually. The questions became smaller and then became absent. He stopped coming to her to talk when something difficult happened at work. He stopped looking for her when he walked into a room. There is a specific moment in a marriage when you notice that your husband has stopped looking for you when he enters a room, and you file it away as tiredness or stress or the weight of the season, and you do not let yourself examine it directly, because examining it directly means admitting something you are not ready to admit. Zoya filed things away for a long time. She threw herself into the building of their life in Seoul because that was what she knew how to do. She was a builder by nature, and because building kept her from the examining. She made the house extraordinary, not in the magazine spread way of people performing domesticity. In the real way, the warm light in the right places, the specific bowl of fruit that was always full, the way she remembered that his colleague Park preferred to be greeted in a certain way and made sure that happened at every gathering. The way she organized his schedule around the rhythms she had learned without being told, the particular coffee from the particular place on the particular morning he had a difficult meeting. She learned him, and she served that learning in 10 small ways every single day, and it was done with love. It was always done with love, but it was also done in the increasing absence of reciprocity, and that absence accumulated the way debt accumulates, quietly, and then all at once. It happened gradually the way these things always do. Not a dramatic switch. A slow dimming. He came home later. He traveled more. The calls he used to make from the car on his way back, the ones where he would ask what she had for lunch and tell her something small and funny about his day, those calls stopped without announcement. She told herself he was under pressure. The Jeon group was expanding. His father had stepped back from the board, and the transition of power was not clean. She gave him room because she understood that pressure required room. She cooked his favorite meals and kept the house immaculate and managed every social obligation on both their calendars and told herself this was what wives did during difficult seasons. She was so busy being understanding that she did not notice she had stopped being a wife and started being a household manager. And this is where I need you to really listen. Because what happened to Zoya is not an unusual story. It is the story of a woman who loved a man so much she made herself invisible, trying to make his life easier. She woke up at 5:30 every morning to make sure his breakfast was ready before his 6 o'clock start. She learned to cook 7 Korean dishes from scratch because his mother had made a comment at a family dinner that Zoya had not heard, but his aunt had repeated to her later. She organized his wardrobe seasonally. She maintained correspondence with his business partners' wives, remembering their children's names, their anniversaries, the specific things they cared about. She was the engine of an entire social infrastructure that made Ryun Jeon look like a man of substance and reliability and warmth. And she did all of it while he was increasingly somewhere else. She found out about Hyunjitsu on a Tuesday. Not through confrontation. Not through anything dramatic. She found a receipt in his jacket pocket when she was taking it to the dry cleaner. A restaurant she did not know. A date she remembered because she had waited for him that evening until 9 p.m. with a dinner she eventually put away. The receipt was for 2. The wine was expensive in the way you make wine expensive when you are trying to impress someone. She stood in the dry cleaning shop holding that receipt for a moment. Then she put it back in his pocket and handed the jacket over and walked home. She did not cry that day. She cried 3 days later in the bathroom at 2 in the morning with the shower running, so the sound went nowhere. She gave herself those minutes. Then she stood up, washed her face, and went back to her life because she had not yet decided what to do, and she was not the kind of woman who acted before she had decided. What she decided, over the weeks that followed, was to watch, to understand the shape of it before she responded to it. She needed to know if this was a moment of weakness or a pattern. She needed to know who this woman was. She needed to know how deep it went before she made a single move, because she understood, with the precision of someone who had studied the Jeon family's world for 4 years, that a wife who accused without evidence in this world did not come out of it well. So she watched, and what she saw was a pattern. And the pattern was deep. And the woman was Ryun Jeon, 29 years old, the daughter of a minor business family with a major appetite for elevation, who had identified Ryun Jeon as the fastest route to the life she had decided she deserved. If you are still watching this video, and your blood pressure has risen slightly, you are exactly who I made this for. Subscribe right now if you have not already, because what Jeon does next is the kind of thing that will make you put your phone down and pick it back up immediately, because you will not be able to help yourself. Like the video, drop a comment, and let us keep going. Ryun Jeon was not subtle. That was the thing about her that Zoya found almost impressive in a clinical way. She did not operate with any particular sophistication. She operated with the blunt confidence of a woman who had decided that boldness was a substitute for intelligence, and had been rewarded for that belief often enough to keep believing it. She called Ryan on a number Zoya was not supposed to know about. She appeared at events on his arm when Zoya was not present, which was carefully engineered by making sure Zoya was not present. She sent things to the house. Not to Ryan. To the house. Small things that required no explanation but communicated everything. A delivery of flowers addressed to Ryan from no-named sender. A dry cleaning pickup for items that were not Ryan's size and not Zoya's size either. Tests. Little precise tests to see how much the wife knew and how much she would tolerate. Zoya received every single one of these things with a face that gave nothing away. She signed for the flowers and put them in a room she did not use. She returned the dry cleaning with a note saying there had been an error. She said nothing to Ryan about any of it because she was still deciding, and because she understood that saying something without a full hand was the same as saying nothing with worse consequences. But Jeon was escalating. That was the problem. When Zoya's silence did not produce the reaction she wanted, which was collapse, which was a wife who fell apart and made the decision easy, she pushed harder. She started appearing in places she had no reason to be. Twice at events where Zoya was the primary host. Once at a restaurant where Zoya was having lunch with the wives of two of Ryan's most important partners. She sat at the bar, alone, visible, and smiled at Zoya when their eyes met. Not a friendly smile. The smile of a woman making a point. Zoya smiled back. She returned to her conversation. She did not allow a single visible thing to change. This made Jeon furious in a way she was not equipped to manage. She had expected a reaction. She had wanted a scene. A crying wife, a confrontation, something that would force Ryan to choose in a moment where Jeon controlled the circumstances. She wanted the explosion. Zoya kept refusing to give it to her. Then came the incident. It happened 4 months ago at a Jeon Group charity event. Zoya was there as a host because she organized half the logistics of these events from the inside, which nobody formally acknowledged and everybody informally relied on. Jeon was there as a guest of someone in Ryan's extended circle, which Zoya suspected was not accidental. Toward the end of the evening, near the coat check, Jeon found her alone. "You know," Jeon said, in Korean, which she knew Zoya understood because Zoya had been speaking Korean for 3 years. "He tells me everything. About you. About the house. About what you are to him." She let that sit. "You are very good at your job. He appreciates you. The way you appreciate a housekeeper who never breaks anything." Zoya looked at her for a moment. "Your coat is lovely," Zoya said. In perfect Korean. "You should go get it before someone else takes it by mistake." She walked away. But something inside her had registered that moment with a permanence that the 14 months of watching had not produced. Because Jeon had used a specific word. Housekeeper. And the reason it landed so precisely was because somewhere in the 4 years of making herself useful and invisible, Zoya had started to wonder if that was actually what she had become. She did not confront Ryan that night. She went home. She sat in the bedroom they still shared in the technical sense of occupying the same space without occupying the same world, and she looked at the ceiling and she made herself a promise. She was not going to keep doing this indefinitely. She was not going to spend the rest of her life being useful to a man who treated her like furniture that had been arranged well. She was going to give it a defined amount of time, and if nothing changed, she was going to leave with her dignity intact. She started the private account the following week. She was not taking his money. Everything she deposited into it came from the consulting work she had quietly been doing for 2 of the social contacts she had built through her years of hosting. Nobody knew about it. Not Ryan. Not anyone in his circle. Just Zoya and the small growing number that represented the beginning of a life she could build alone if she had to. She had decided she probably had to. And then 2 weeks ago, Ryan witnessed something that ended whatever remaining fraction of doubt Zoya had been carrying. There was a dinner at the house. A small one. 4 of Ryan's business associates and their wives. Zoya had cooked for 6 hours. The table was set with the precision of someone who understands that these dinners are not about food, but about the feeling of being in a home that is alive and considered and warm. She had arranged flowers from the garden. She had remembered that one of the wives was allergic to shellfish and had redesigned an entire course around it. She was in the kitchen plating the final course when she heard Jisoo's voice in the hallway. She came out. Jisoo was standing in the entrance of the dining room. She had not been invited. She had apparently arrived with one of the associates as a last-minute addition that nobody had thought to mention to Zoya. She looked around the room with the expression of someone who had intended to find something unimpressive and was annoyed at not finding it. Then her eyes landed on Zoya in the kitchen doorway, and she said, loudly enough for the table to hear, "Oh, I did not realize the help would be joining us." The table went quiet. Zoya went completely still, and Ryun Jeon, at the head of his table, in his home that his wife had just spent 6 hours preparing, looked at Zoya once, and then looked away. He said nothing. He picked up his wine glass. He said something to the associate on his left, and the dinner continued. That was the moment. Not the receipt. Not the flowers. Not the 14 months of watching. That moment. Her husband looking at her, and then looking away while a woman called her the help in her own home. She finished serving the dinner. She was pleasant to every guest. She cleared the table. She washed the dishes. She went to bed before the guests left because she did not trust what was on her face anymore, and she was not going to let any of them see it. She did not sleep. She lay in the dark, and she thought about 4 years, and she thought about Lagos and the embassy function and the food table and the man who had laughed at her joke and listened to her for 2 hours without checking his phone. She thought about who she had been when she met him, and she thought about who she had become in the service of keeping his world running, and she understood with a clarity that does not arrive gently that she had made herself disappear, trying to make him look better. She was done. She had already been done. She knew that. She had known it for months in the part of her that had been quietly building an exit. But the dinner confirmed it in the part that had still been holding a small, unreasonable hope that she would not have to go. She contacted a lawyer the next morning. Not a Seoul lawyer. A lawyer she had found independently, recommended through a contact she had made at one of the international diplomat gatherings she attended in her capacity as Ryun Jeon's wife, the same capacity he had just allowed to be publicly humiliated in his dining room. The paperwork was going to take time to prepare properly, but she was preparing it. She wanted it done correctly. She wanted nothing he could challenge. She was building her exit quietly, the way she built everything, with patience and precision and without making a sound. And then the afternoon of the gala arrived, and Jisoo walked into her kitchen and called her the help again and told her to her face that tonight the whole of Seoul was going to see who Ryun Jeon had really chosen. And something in Zoya that had been very still for a very long time stood up. Now, before we go back into that ballroom, I need you to do something for me. If you are watching this, and you have ever poured yourself into a person or a situation and been made to feel like your contribution was invisible, I need you to drop a comment right now and just say I see you, Zoya. Because she needs to know the whole world is watching tonight. Like this video, subscribe if you have not already, and let us get back to that ballroom because Ryun Jeon's chair just moved and the whole room just inhaled, and we need to see what happens next. Ryun Jeon stood up. 300 people watched him push back his chair and stand at the head of his table, and for 3 full seconds nobody in that room breathed. Not the partners. Not the old families. Not the journalists positioned near the east wall. Not Hyun Jisoo, whose smile had started doing something complicated the moment the room went quiet at Zoya's entrance and had not recovered since. He straightened his jacket. The same jacket Zoya had laid out on the chair in the dressing room that morning because she had learned his habits so completely that she prepared things he did not even know he needed until they were already there. He straightened that jacket, and he walked out from behind the table. He walked toward the entrance. He walked toward her. Jisoo's hand, which had been resting on the table near his empty seat, went very still. Zoya watched him come. She had promised herself she would not give anything away on her face, and she was keeping that promise with everything she had because the truth was that she did not know how to feel about what was happening. He was coming to her, in front of everyone. He was making a choice that 300 witnesses were recording in real time. But Zoya had spent 4 years learning the difference between a man who chooses you and a man who chooses what you represent, and she had not yet determined which one she was looking at. He stopped in front of her. Up close, in the chandelier light of the Grand Hyatt, she could see something on his face that she had not seen from across the room. He was not performing. His expression was not the managed, careful look he used in business settings or the charming warmth he deployed at social functions. He looked like a man who had just been confronted with something he had been avoiding and could no longer avoid. He looked, for the first time in a very long time, like he was actually seeing her. "Zoya," he said. She said nothing. He extended his arm. The formal gesture, the one that said you belong beside me in this room, the one that would communicate to every person watching that there was only one woman in the Jeon family as far as this evening was concerned. Zoya looked at his arm. Then she looked at his face. And in the silence of that look, she gave him the full weight of everything. The receipt in the jacket pocket. The flowers addressed to no one. The dinner. The look away. All of it in her eyes for exactly the time it took him to understand what she was giving him. Then she took his arm. Because she had not come here tonight to make a scene. She had come here to be seen. And she was being seen. By everyone who mattered. In the most public and permanent way possible. And if this was the last night she ever stood beside Ryun Jeon, then she was going to stand beside him correctly, and she was going to make sure that every person in that room went home understanding who had held this family together. She took his arm, and he walked her to the table. And the room, slowly, in the way that rooms recover after something seismic, came back to life around them. At the head table, there were 4 seats. Ryan's at the head. The seat to his right, where Zoya now sat. The seat to his left, which was empty. And across the table, where Ryun Jeon sat. Her smile entirely gone, her hands flat on the white tablecloth. Her silver dress, which had looked so confident an hour ago, now looking like a costume at the wrong event. Nobody looked at Jeon directly. That was the particular cruelty of rooms like this one. They did not need to look at her. They simply arranged themselves around Zoya's presence with the instinctive precision of people who understand social architecture. Chairman Wu caught Zoya's eye from table 7 and raised his glass. Mrs. Shin left her table entirely and came to greet Zoya personally, both hands warm around hers, telling her she looked extraordinary, telling her the Jeon family was blessed. 3 other women followed in the next 20 minutes. Not to the table, to Zoya specifically, seeking her out where she sat, acknowledging her, making her visibility in that room permanent and witnessed. Jeon sat across the table through all of it. Ryan sat beside Zoya, and he was extremely careful not to look at the seat across from him. The dinner began. Courses arrived. Conversation moved around the table in the way conversation moves when everyone is performing normalcy over the wreckage of something enormous. Zoya spoke when spoken to. She was warm. She was gracious. She complimented the right people. She laughed at the right moments. She was, as she had always been, flawless at this, the performance of a woman who belongs completely in the room she is in. Under the table, her hands were in her lap, and they were shaking slightly. Only she knew that. Halfway through the main course, Jeon stood up. She said something brief to the person beside her. She picked up her clutch, and she left the table. She walked across the ballroom with her chin up and her face doing its very best to communicate that she was leaving because she chose to and not because the evening had become something she could not survive, and she walked through a side door that led to the corridor. She did not come back. Nobody at the table mentioned it. Not then. Not for the rest of the evening. Ryan noticed. Zoya saw him notice. She watched him watch Jeon leave, and she watched something move in his expression and then get managed, and then get buried. He picked up his fork. He turned to the partner on his right and resumed a conversation about the Incheon development project. He was very good at this. He had always been very good at this. Containing things. Managing things. Moving on. He had been doing it to her for 4 years. At 11 p.m., when the formal proceedings of the evening were concluding and the room had loosened into the comfortable murmur of after-dinner conversation and polite exits, Ryan leaned close to her and said quietly, "Can we talk?" It was not a question. Zoya looked at him. "Yes," she said. "We can." They found a room off the main corridor, a small private meeting room that was unlocked and unoccupied. He closed the door. She stood on one side of the table. He stood on the other. And for a moment neither of them spoke, because the silence between them had 4 years in it, and it was not a small thing to start breaking it open. "You came," he said finally. "I came," she said. "Zoya." He stopped. "Tried again. What happened tonight? I want you to know I did not plan for it to be like this." She looked at him. "Which part did you not plan for, Ryan? The part where you brought her here, or the part where I arrived?" He had no answer for that. Which was an answer. "I have known about Jisoo for 14 months, she said. She said it the way she had practiced saying it. In her head, in the bathroom at 2 in the morning, in the kitchen when she was alone. Cleanly, without the shake in her voice that wanted to be there. I have said nothing. Not once. I have continued to manage your home, host your dinners, maintain your reputation with people like Chairman Wu and the Shin family. People who respect the Jeon name partly because of the work I have done that you have never once formally acknowledged." She paused. "I have done all of that while knowing. While watching you leave. While watching her come closer." Ryan was not speaking. He was looking at her in the way a man looks at something he has broken and is only now understanding the full extent of the damage. "Tonight," Zoya continued, "she came to my house. To my kitchen. And she told me I was the help." She held his gaze. "And you, 2 weeks ago at the dinner. You sat at the head of a table that I had spent 6 hours preparing, and you watched her say something similar, and you picked up your wine glass and said nothing. The room was very quiet. Zoya, I am not asking for an explanation," she said. "I am not here for an argument. I came tonight because I was not going to let her have the last word in my own house." She straightened. "She told me tonight was going to prove you had chosen her. And maybe you had. I do not know what you have told her about your intentions. But I needed to come here and stand in this room and be who I have always been before I make my final decision." He crossed the room toward her. She did not step back because she was not a woman who stepped back, but she watched him come with a wariness that she had not felt with him before, the specific wariness of a woman who has been disappointed so many times by someone she loves that she no longer fully trusts her own response to his proximity. "I chose you tonight," he said, "in front of everyone. You saw it." "I saw it," she said. "And I also know why." He stopped. "What does that mean?" "It means I know this room, Ryan. I know Chairman Wu. I know the Shin family. I know what my presence here tonight meant to your business relationships and your reputation and the deal you are negotiating with the infrastructure committee that requires you to be seen as a stable family man." She looked at him steadily. "I know you chose me. I also know it was not only for me." The silence that followed that sentence was different from the others. It had a specific weight because it was true and they both knew it was true, and the knowing sat between them like something that had always been in the room and had only now been named. Ryun Jeon looked at his wife. At the woman who had ironed his shirt that morning. At the woman who had come to this ballroom, not knowing what he was going to do and had stood in that entrance with everything on the line and had not broken. At the woman who knew him well enough to see through the choice he had made to the calculation underneath it. "Zoya," he said. And his voice was different. The management had gone out of it. "I have made a mistake that I do not know how to name correctly because I have been making it for so long I stopped seeing it. I stopped seeing you. Not because you became less. Because I became the kind of person who takes things for granted that should never be taken for granted." He exhaled slowly. "She is nothing to what you are. She has never been. And I have been a fool of the most specific and unforgivable kind. The kind who does not understand what he has until the moment it is standing in a doorway in a burgundy dress in front of everyone he has ever needed to impress, and he understands that he has been treating gold like it was just the color of the floor." Zoya breathed slowly. She felt it. Of course she felt it. He was not a stupid man, and he was not an unkind one. She had always known that, and the thing he had just said was real. She could hear that it was real, and the part of her that had loved him for 4 years and had been waiting for exactly this, for him to actually see her, that part wanted to close the distance between them and let it be enough. But she had spent 4 years letting things be enough that were not enough. She had built an entire vocabulary of almost okay around a situation that was not okay, and she was not going to do it again simply because he had finally found the right words in a coat room at 11 p.m. while 300 people waited outside. "I believe you," she said. And she meant it. "I believe that you mean that right now. In this room. Tonight. Zoya. And tomorrow," she continued. When you wake up and the gala is over and the room is no longer watching, I need to know who you are then. I have never been able to count on who you are when no one is watching. That is the thing I cannot get past. He was quiet. I am going to go home tonight, she said. And tomorrow I need you to understand that the conversation we have had in this room has not fixed anything. What you did tonight in front of that room was the right thing. It was overdue, and it was the right thing. But a marriage is not saved in a single gesture in front of witnesses. It is saved in every ordinary moment when no one is watching. And I do not know yet if you are capable of that. She picked up her clutch from the table. I am going to go home, she said again. And in the morning my lawyer will be in touch. She walked to the door. He did not stop her. He stood in that room, and he let her go because he understood, for possibly the first time in 4 years, that stopping her was not the point. The point was whether he was going to change. And that was not a question he could answer in a corridor at 11 p.m. That was a question that required more than a night. Ryun Jeon stood alone in that small meeting room for 7 minutes after she left. He stood there, and he did something he had not done in a long time. He let himself feel the full weight of what he had done without immediately finding a way to manage it or reframe it or redirect his attention away from it. He let it land. The receipt in the jacket pocket that she had quietly put back. 14 months of knowing and saying nothing while she continued to iron his shirts and manage his household and make his life look like something worth having. The dinner. The looking away. His wife standing in her own kitchen being called to help by a woman he had brought into their orbit through his own choices, and him picking up his wine glass and saying nothing. He was not a cruel man. He needed to sit with the fact that a man who is not cruel can still do cruel things through the accumulation of small abdications. Through the 10,000 moments of looking away. Through the comfort of being well served by someone you have stopped seeing as a person who also needs serving. He thought about Lagos. About the food table. About a woman in a green dress who had not known who he was and had told him she had fast hands, and he had laughed harder than he had laughed at anything in months. He had pursued her across an ocean because she was the realest person he had met in years, and because something about her specific quality of being fully herself without any performance of it had made him want to be in the same room as her indefinitely. And then he had brought her into his world, and his world had slowly, systematically, covered her in the weight of its requirements, and he had let it happen because it was convenient to let it happen. She was so good at it. She made it look effortless. And the thing about people who are extraordinary at holding things together is that you stop noticing the holding because all you see is the together. He had stopped seeing the holding. He went back into the ballroom. He said the right things to the right people for another 40 minutes because the evening still had professional obligations attached to it, and he handled them with the efficiency of a man operating on the surface of himself. Chairman Wu shook his hand warmly and said your wife looked magnificent tonight, and Ryan said thank you with the specific feeling of a man being complimented on something he had done nothing to deserve. He went home at midnight to a house where Zoya was in bed with the light off. He stood in the doorway of the room they technically still shared, and he looked at the shape of her in the dark, and he thought about everything she had said in that coat room, and he thought about the years before it, and he thought about who he had been when he chose her, and who he had become since, and the distance between those two men was not a comfortable distance to measure. He did not wake her. He went to the study. He sat in the dark for a long time. And then he got out a piece of paper. Not his phone. Paper. And he wrote down every specific thing he had failed at. Not in the abstract. Specifically, the dinner in October when she had come home sick and he had still expected the table to be set. The birthday, her 32nd, when he had sent flowers to the house because he was in Busan and had thought flowers were sufficient. The morning she had asked him about something she was working on, and he had answered with half his attention and then looked at his phone. He filled the page. He turned it over and kept going. He was not making a list to show her. He was writing it because he needed to see the full shape of it himself before he could honestly assess whether he was capable of changing, which was not a single dramatic gesture in a ballroom, but a complete and permanent restructuring of how he moved through the world in relation to her. He did not know yet if he was capable of that. He understood, sitting in his study at 1 in the morning with a page and a half of specifics in front of him, that finding out was going to require showing up in the quiet, ordinary moments with no audience. In the consistent, unremarkable daily choosing of her, that was the only kind of choosing that actually built anything. He had a lot of ground to cover. Whether she would give him the chance to cover it was not a question he could answer for her. Now, if you have been watching this story from the beginning and you have felt every single moment of it, I need you to stop right here and subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling me whether you think Zoya should give him another chance or whether she should walk and never look back. Because what she does next is going to surprise you. And the person who shows up at her door 3 weeks after the lawyers get involved is the last person any of us expected. Like this video right now and keep watching because we are not done. Zoya filed the papers the morning after the gala. She made herself coffee first. She sat at the kitchen table in the house she had built into a home for 4 years, and she drank her coffee and looked out at the garden, and then she called her lawyer and said the words that made it official. Then she made herself breakfast because she had not eaten properly the night before, and she was not going to fall apart without at least having eggs first. The news did not stay quiet for long. In a family of the Jeon Group's profile, it was never going to stay quiet. By the second week it had reached the business press, described carefully as sources close to the family indicating a separation. By the third week the full picture was closer to the surface, helped along by people who had been at the gala and had their own understanding of what they had witnessed. Ryun Jeon did not make a public statement. He also did not fight the filing. He called her 3 times in the days after the gala. She took the first call and listened and said clearly that she needed him to respect the process and that anything they needed to discuss could go through her lawyer. He said he understood. He said other things too. He was sorry. He had been wrong. He did not ask her to take it back. He asked only if there was any version of any future in which she would consider. She told him she did not know. She told him that was the honest answer. He said that was fair. She almost broke on that call. She wanted to be honest about that. She almost broke because grief does not care how justified your decisions are. Grief arrives in its own timing, and it does not check whether you made the right choice before it makes you feel the weight of the loss. She missed him. Not the recent version of him. The first-year version. The food table version. The person she had believed he was going to remain being. You can grieve the loss of a person who is still alive if what you are grieving is the version of them you believed in. She was grieving that. She let herself grieve it. But she did not go back. 6 weeks after the filing, Ryun Jeon gave an interview. This was perhaps the least intelligent decision Jeon had made in a long series of decisions of varying intelligence, and the interview made her look exactly as it made her look. She said things about the Jeon family that were unverifiable, and about Zoya specifically that were the kind of things people say when they are performing a version of events they need to believe. The interviewer was not kind in the editing. The public was not kind in the comments. Several of the business publications that covered the Jeon Group ran corrective pieces. Chairman Woo's office put out a statement of support for Zoya Atomy Jeon that was 3 sentences long and carried more weight than a full press release because of who it came from. Jeon did not give another interview. Zoya read the original interview once, and then put her phone face down and made herself dinner and watched something funny and laughed genuinely at it, and went to bed. She was not going to spend her energy on Jeon. She had never been going to spend her energy on Jeon. The person she had been in conflict with was never really Jeon. It was the version of her own life that had stopped belonging to her. That was the thing she had been fighting to reclaim. And she was reclaiming it now. She took a consulting position with a trade liaison office that had been pursuing her for 2 years through the network she had built as a Jeon wife. The irony was not lost on her that the professional opportunities she was now pursuing had been created largely by the work she had done inside a marriage that had undervalued her. She was going to allow herself exactly 1 moment of finding that funny, and then she was going to build something serious with it. She started. She was good at it. Extraordinarily good, the way people are when they are finally doing the thing they are actually built for. The trade liaison work required exactly the skills she had developed as a Jeon wife. Reading rooms, managing alliances, remembering what mattered to which person and why, building the kind of trust that made large things possible, except now those skills were deployed on her own behalf and in service of her own name. She was not the background anymore. She was the foreground. She was the person people called. She showed up to meetings, and people were glad she was there and said so out loud in rooms where it was heard by the right people. She rented an apartment in Mapo-gu with a kitchen she had chosen herself and light that came in from the east every morning and a bookshelf she was filling slowly and deliberately with things that were only hers. No one else's preferences on those shelves. No one else's schedule determining when she slept. Just her life, arranged according to her. and the specific piece of that was something she had not fully understood she was missing until she had it. She made mistakes in those first months of being alone. She worked too much because work felt clean and progress felt like evidence that she was okay. She called her mother too late at night sometimes because she needed the sound of a voice that had loved her since before she was complicated. She cried once in the supermarket, standing in the grain aisle looking at a specific brand of rice that Ryan had liked, and the grief arrived without permission, and she stood there for a moment, and then she put the rice in her basket anyway, because she also liked that rice, and she was not going to reorganize her grocery shopping around a feeling. She cried in the car on the way home instead. Then she made the rice for dinner, and it was fine, and she ate it, and went to bed, and in the morning, she was still herself. That was the thing she kept returning to in those months. She was still herself. She had come out of 4 years of making herself smaller, and she was still the full-sized version of the person she had been. A little worn in some places. Wiser in ways she had not asked to be wise. But whole. Unmistakably, stubbornly, completely whole. She called her mother on a Sunday evening and told her everything. Her mother listened without interrupting for a long time. Then she said, in Yoruba, the language that always felt like home when everything else felt unfamiliar. You went there not knowing what would happen, and you stood in that room anyway. You did not know if you would win. You went because you refused to be small one more time. That is who I raised. That is exactly who I raised. She paused. Come home for Christmas. Bring nothing except yourself. I will make everything. Zoya said she would. And she did. December in Lagos was everything. Seoul was not in the best possible way. Loud and warm and saturated with the specific color of a place that has never apologized for being exactly what it is. Her mother made enough food for 17 people even though there were 9. Her cousins argued about football with the passionate investment of people who had been having the same argument for 11 years and intended to have it for 11 more. Her uncle told a story she had heard 4 times, and she laughed at it like it was new because his face when he got to the good part was worth it every single time. She slept 10 hours her first night home. She woke up and smelled her mother's cooking before she was fully conscious and lay in her childhood bed and stared at the ceiling and felt something that she had not felt in a very long time. Safe. Completely and entirely safe. She stayed 3 weeks. She came back to Seoul in January with her shoulders different, lower and more settled, like she had put something down in Lagos that she had not realized she was still carrying. 3 months after the filing was when she met Marcus Yoon. She was at a business panel on economic partnership between West Africa and East Asia. She was on the panel. She was extraordinary on the panel, the way that made people in the audience lean forward slightly. Afterward, at the reception, he came to speak to her. Tall, easy in his posture, half Korean, half American. Development Fund. 8 years in the space between Africa and Asia. He disagreed with part of her argument in a way that was specific and respectful, and she told him he was correct in one dimension, and he looked at her like someone who had not been told they were right in a while, and found it startling. They talked for an hour and a half. She did not notice the time passing. He asked if they could continue the conversation. She held the yes for a moment and examined where it came from. Genuine interest. Real curiosity. The right place. She said yes. A year after the gala, Zoya Adami sat at a window table in a restaurant in Itaewon that she had chosen herself because it had good food and good light, and she had priorities. She was waiting for Marcus, who was reliably 7 minutes late in a way she had already decided was acceptable, because in every other dimension, he was exactly present. She was reading a message from her mother asking if she was bringing him to Lagos at Easter, which was a question her mother had no business asking yet, and was asking anyway, because she was Adana Adami, and she did not wait for business. Zoya was smiling at her phone when she looked up and saw Ryan. He was across the restaurant with a colleague. Nothing personal, just documents and unresolved business. He looked well. A little quieter than she remembered, in the way that people look when they have been through something and have been honest with themselves about what it taught them. She noticed all of this in the 3 seconds before he looked up and saw her. He went still. She held his gaze for a moment. No performance in either direction. No residual anger. No lingering bitterness. The specific, clean, clear-eyed quality of a woman who has processed her grief completely enough that what she is left with on the other side is something closer to understanding than to pain. She had loved him. She had lost him. She had survived the losing and built something on the other side of it that was entirely hers. She nodded once. Civil real. He nodded back. She looked back at her phone. Marcus arrived 4 minutes later, which was an improvement, and sat down across from her, and said, "You're smiling at your phone, which either means your mother or something good." And she said, "Both, actually." And he said, "Tell me." And she told him, and he listened like the answer was the point. 2 years after the night, she stood in that ballroom doorway, not knowing what was going to happen. Zoya Adami signed her name to a partnership agreement that established her own consultancy. The launch event was attended by Chairman Wu, who had called her personally to say he would be there. Mrs. Shin brought flowers. Several women she had met through years of Jeon family events came not as a courtesy to any name, but because they had watched her build this and wanted to be in the room when it became official. She stood at the front of that room in a green dress. Not the embassy function green. Her own green, chosen by herself on a Tuesday morning in a boutique in Mapogu because she had looked at it and thought yes, simply yes. She said what she meant to say. She thanked the people who deserved thanking. She did not mention the years of being the help. She did not need to. Every person in that room who knew her story understood what this room represented without being told. Afterward, Marcus found her near the window. "How do you feel?" he asked. She thought about it honestly. "Like myself," she said. "Completely like myself." He smiled. "That is the right answer." She looked around the room. At the people she had gathered here by being exactly who she was. At the work she had built from the materials of her own resilience. At the life she had constructed on the other side of the hardest thing she had ever done. She was going to be all right. She was already all right. She had been all right all along. She had just needed to stand in a doorway in a burgundy dress and find that out for herself. If this story reached you today, if any part of Zoya's journey sat somewhere close in your chest, I need you to do something for me right now. Drop a comment below and tell me the moment that hit you the hardest. Was it the iron shirt? The looking away at the dinner? The ballroom entrance? The coat room? The grain aisle? Tell me, because stories like this one only mean something when the people watching them feel seen by them. Share this video with someone who needs it today. Someone who has been the engine of someone else's life and has not yet been seen for it. Someone who has been making herself small, trying to keep someone else's world large. Like this video. Subscribe to this channel. And remember this. The most important room you will ever walk into is not a ballroom. It is the room inside yourself where you finally decide that you are enough. Zoya decided. She stood in that doorway not knowing what would happen, and she decided anyway. And so can you. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. I will see you in the next one.